All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being with me. Love this time each week with you. And as always, if you have any questions, I'll leave some time at the end so we can have a little question and answer period. Hey, Michelle, I learned something too. I'm going to turn on my original sound. So when I play the piano and play tracks for you guys, hopefully it will sound the best that Zoom will allow.
Okay.
But then I will turn it back off because I think that's what was causing the glitchiness in the feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
So if that ever happens to you with another person, I figured that out this week. So
Okay.
Zoom tidbits.
Yep.
All right, here we go. I'm going to turn that on. So if I play the piano or anything, it shouldn't affect, as long as you guys are all muted, it shouldn't affect anything. And if it does, let me know. All right, there we go. Um, let's go. There I am. Same as always. If anybody has any wants to get in touch with me, you know I am always open. And Jeff, I have an email from you. I will get it back to you. And you can find out more about me there and send me a message. Or if you have any questions as well about this, I think that the interesting thing about all of these composers is I guess I'll say, like, in the spirit of exploration, I've done as much exploring as I can up until this time, but there's so much out there. You may find something or a piece or some tidbit that I did not come across. And if you do, please share it with me. I'd love to know. Or if you have a question about them. All right, here we go. Here are our hidden gems, and these are our unknown, possibly great composers that are living in the shadows of many musical giants. And this week we're going to look at number 2 here, her with her big hat on. Her name is Cécile Chaminade. And let's get into her. Here's Cécile, and she was a French composer, and she was awarded the Legion of Honor in 1913, and she was the first female recipient of this notable accomplishment. And she published more than 400 works in her life. And you'll have to tell me, anybody after, if you're familiar with her. I was completely unfamiliar with her. I had never even read her name, before getting into this more deeply. But she wrote many concert pieces, the Concertino for flute and the 6 concert etudes, the Clearaway Ballet Suite, a concertstück for piano and orchestra, and many, many songs and piano miniatures, which is actually going to be our focus today as we look at her. But who was she living in the shadows of? In French society and musical culture, she was living around the time of a great deal of top drawer people. But some of the famous ones were Gabriel Fauré, a very great composer, great organist, and composer of many things. You'll often hear him on WQXR with chamber music, piano quartets, and a beautiful Requiem by Fauré that's very, very famous. He was also a great organist. The middle gentleman there is Camille Saint-Saëns, very prominent composer throughout the 19th century. Many symphonies and ballets and operas. He's probably the most known now for the Carnival of the Animals, though originally the Carnival of the Animals was just written as a salon piece for his friends, and he never intended it to be publicly performed, and now it turns out to be probably his most famous piece. And then down there on the bottom right, almost an exact contemporary in terms of the time of their lives, is Debussy. And Debussy and Chaminade could not be more different. Debussy was a groundbreaker and pushed the limits on so many musical elements of orchestration and form and tonality and chord structures and things like that. And totally opposite, Chaminade was very much a romantic 19th century composer. Very, very different for those two. But she also lived in the shadow of some other people. I think historically, we're going to find that she's in the shadow of Chopin and also Tchaikovsky, just to name two. There are several others. I'll mention them as we get into it. but we'll look more closely at how they are related to Chaminade. I want to play a piece for you, since she's probably largely unknown. Let's start off with a little piece of music by her. It's funny, for a lady that wrote hundreds and hundreds of solo piano pieces, and that was probably the most widely known at her time, in her time, for those works, she is now almost completely known for this one piece of music. And if there are any flautists out there, or if any of you are, family members or friends of flautists, they probably are very familiar with this piece. It is the Concertino for Flute. It's a flute and orchestra piece. It was originally written for flute and piano, but quickly orchestrated by Chaminade after the premiere of it for a concert in England. And she wrote this piece in 1902 for the flute auditions to the Conservatoire de Paris. And as we listen to it, I think if this is your first listen to music by Chaminade, let's note some of her hallmarks. First and most gloriously is her beautiful melody. Chaminade wrote gorgeous melodies over and over and over, the huge hallmark of her music. Another aspect here is her orchestration is great. The flute is a delicate instrument. And when you're writing for it, you have to be careful to not overpower it. You can very easily layer on the orchestration and bury the soloist. So as we listen to this opening minute and a half or so, just listen to how delicate her orchestration is when the flute comes in. It's lots of very gauzy, supportive but slight textures, of the strings and the quiet wind instruments. She doesn't have any big, thundering brass or anything like that, which would completely cover the flute. So here, let's listen to this opening section of the Concertino for Flute. And I'm going to play a recording here by James Galway, who has about 100 recordings on YouTube alone of this piece. All right, that's the opening section there of her Concertino for Flute, and such a beautiful melody, so like effortless sounding, and as reported by flute players, it is very difficult because the tone and the melody itself is very beautiful, but it has lots of very tricky passage work in there and very fast scales, which James Galway makes sound so easy, but are actually very, very hard. And I guess just one of those things too, I found this on other pieces of music. When she wrote this, all of these people had to play it, to audition for the conservatory, and it's a great way of embedding your piece into the repertoire for future generations, because if it's good, then those teachers will then pass it along to, or those incoming students will then grow up and maybe become teachers or professionals and continue to pass the piece along further and further and further. So that's where that has come from and how it's ingrained itself into our culture. But let's talk a little bit more about Chaminade's background and how it impacted her life as a composer. So she was born and lived a great deal of her life in Paris, France. She was from a very prosperous family, and the family was very well connected in cultural and artistic circles, throughout Paris and musical culture in France. And she began her music lessons with her mother. And she was very precocious. She was very good. And here we have, by the time she was 8 years old, she was invited to play for the great composer Georges Bizet. And at the time, Bizet was a phenomenon, huge deal, composer of the opera Carmen, most famously, and many other things, symphonies and things like that. He was a family friend, and he was very supportive of Cecile's compositions and her work. And he encouraged her parents to send her to the Paris Conservatory. But her father would not allow it. He did not think that the serious study of music was becoming of a young girl that was, eventually going to enter society, and did not allow her to go and study at the Paris Conservatory. She did study privately with several notable teachers in piano, composition, and violin. And by the time she was 18, she did give a big public concert in Paris that was very successful. As she was growing here as a composer, she did have champions. The Isidore Philipp, the head of the piano department at the Paris Conservatory, championed her works. And she was extremely popular as a concert performer in England and in America. When she did an American tour in 1908, she nearly broke the ticket sale record at Carnegie Hall. And Queen Victoria, as well, was a big fan of Chaminade, so much so that at her funeral, Queen Victoria requested that a piece of Chaminade's be played. And she also, in America, as we were talking about the ticket sale factor, she had these huge clubs, and they were Chaminade clubs. They were often fully populated by women. If you see this cartoon here, it's from St. Louis in 1908, and the little sign up at the top says, "It was a social function attended by 300 women, no men, and all guests standing." It's a characteristic of the American people. I don't know why she said that, but this is true. There were these huge clubs all over America that were hugely supportive of her. She's in some way had some good connection here. Interestingly enough, too, her place in culture, or in pop culture at the time, she inspired a cologne or a perfume there on the left. And she also had a line of cigarettes named after her. So she was big. All right, let's look at one other quote here. This is from Ambroise Thomas. He's a very well and highly regarded composer in France at the same time, a composer of the opera Mignon, and also of another operatic version of Hamlet. And he says, "This is not a woman who composes, but a composer who is a woman." So I think that leads us to why. If she's all these things, if all these composers and all of these people are supportive of her, why? What happened? Why don't we know her? Why is she not a name that we know? Like Clara Schumann or Alma Mahler, two other women who were in the male-dominated classical establishment. And the things that I've read about it is I think it's a kind of a collision of, you have this celebration of her by these notable figures and these people who are in high standing in musical circles, and you also have this sexism at the time. Starting with her father, and then continuing into her professional life. When Chaminade would write pieces for orchestra, the critics would say that the music had like the air of masculinity about it or something, or some form of some derogatory aspect to the music because it was written by a woman. Or then if she wrote a salon piece and that was successful, they'd say, "Oh, well, that's just a little trifle. And of course she's good at it because she's a woman." And lots of commentary about things like that. It's sort of a, bad if you do it and you're bad if you don't. No matter which way she was going, she was not finding any success there. So I think that's a little bit of why we don't know her. But let's dig into some reasons why we should know her. So as I said earlier, besides the huge and popular composers in the French world of music, like Saint-Saëns and Debussy, you also have these giant figures on the world stage of music and the culture of music in Chopin and also in Tchaikovsky, and they, amongst many different kinds of things that they did, they were masters of musical miniatures. And let's also look, as was Chaminade, and let's look at a couple of the connections between those two giants and Chaminade's work. And you might also wonder why did composers write musical miniatures? What was the reasoning behind it? Some of them are practical, and actually most of them are practical, I think. If you have a case like Haydn or even Brahms, sometimes you were dealing with the short attention spans of royalty, especially with Haydn. Haydn's symphonies, sometimes all four movements would be under 20 minutes, which is crazy when you think later in the 20th century with people like Bruckner and Mahler, you have symphonies where one movement is 20 minutes or even longer than that. But Haydn was working in a very different musical environment at the time. Even somebody like Mozart, who you don't really think of him often in terms of musical miniatures because he wrote great extended pieces, like operas and symphonies and concertos. When he was working in Salzburg, the archbishop there was so concerned that the music would, detract or take away from the sermon that he wanted all the musical excerpts within the mass to be very, very short. And you find some of these masses where the Gloria, which in a big composition of a mass, the Gloria can be an elaborate, enormous piece of music. And some of the Mozart Glorias are like a minute long. So you have these very practical concerns, of the church telling them what to do, or of knowing your audience, what can they take, and if it's too long, they'll tune out or not come at all. In the case of Chaminade, you have an interesting turn of events with her. She turned to musical miniatures because of the death of her father. She was growing in stature as a composer and composing longer and longer works, some of them orchestral, and they were getting better and better. But with the death of her father, she needed to secure make the family financially secure. And at the time, it was very good business to sell piano miniatures. Everybody had a piano in their house, and it was very, very popular, to sell musical miniatures that could be played. Not everybody could sit down and play a Brahms piano concerto or even, a two piano version of these giant masterworks. So these little miniature pieces of music were very popular, and she sold tons and tons of music like this. And like I said at the beginning, had published over 400 pieces. Let's look specifically. Hang on, Zoom is causing me trouble here. All right, let's see if I can go on here. I'm gonna reshare this. Okay, here we go. All right, let's dig in specifically. Let's look at Chopin to begin. So Chopin's a Polish composer, romantic composer, and Chopin wrote almost exclusively for piano, not completely. There are cello sonatas for piano and cello and songs and things like that, but I think when most of us think of Chopin, you think of piano solo. And his famous works include tons and tons of preludes and etudes, mazurkas, waltzes, ballads, polonaises, scherzos, and sonatas. Maybe, without excluding the sonatas, many of those other works, they're small. They are miniature pieces. He would often group them, so you'd have 10 nocturnes or, a whole set of 24 preludes. But each individual prelude or nocturne itself would be small, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, kind of like a song. and very much in the same world as as Chaminade is. And let's look at one of his specific pieces of music. All you pianists out there will know this, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this once I play the melody for you. But it's Chopin's Etude, Opus 10, number 3. All right, this is one of Chopin's most famous pieces of music. It's also interesting to note that it's an etude, and the word etude means study. And you have an instance here of where what used to be an academic piece, composers or teachers would write or make etudes or studies for their students to focus on a single musical characteristic and build that ability. They were often not. They weren't pieces of music, that you would want to listen to. They were meant to be exercises. And here, you get the emergence of concert etudes. These are pieces of music that are pieces of music in their own right. And this one particular is very, very beautiful. In terms of the Chopin, it's a known piece. The aspect that I want to look at it here is in its phrase length. It does this very interesting thing. And I think that this is kind of this happens at times. It's hard to tell. And I'll get into that. Phrase length can be, I think it's very special, and it can also be hidden, because if something's very beautiful, sometimes you don't notice some kind of hidden obscurity about it. But in this case, we have it. If you recall from some of our earlier lectures, we were talking about how musical phrases or sections are oftentimes in easily definable groups. Sometimes there's as short as 2 or 4, 8, 16, or even 32 bars. And there's an evenness about that. You can break 2 into 1 and 1, and 4 into 2 and 2, and so on. In case of 8, many times you'll have the phrases broken down into 2 smaller 4-bar sections. But in this case with the Chopin, he breaks his down. Instead of 4 and 4, it's 5 and 3. So the first 5 bars there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, represents the first half of this phrase. And then the second half, instead of it being 4 more or an even 5, it's 3. And I think Chopin's a genius in this case because you don't notice it. When the music is going on, it's deceptive. You don't really hear that until you look at it. But I think it's a great thing, and I think it's worth noting about it. Here, let me play the melody for you, just so you're familiar with which piece I mean. So that is an 8-bar phrase broken down into 5 and 3. And then here I want to show you the second phrase too, because he does another thing like that. The second phrase after that is 12 bars. And again, instead of it being 3 sets of 4 or an 8 and a 4 or 6 and 6, he does that same thing where it's 5 plus 7. So again, I think when we listen to it, you don't really hear it, but just calling it out, I'd love for you to notice it. I'm going to play it for you now, and I'd love it if you let me know if you hear it, or if you don't want to, don't. It might be one of those things. It's like, you might not want to know every brush stroke in the Mona Lisa. You might just want to see it for what it is. But even so, know that it's there, and know that that kind of oddity is functioning below the surface of what we're listening to. Before I start to play the music, I want to talk just briefly about the form. The pretty melody that I was just playing forms this A section, and the big form of this piece is ternary form. It's A, B, A. The A section is that slow, beautiful melody that I was playing. And then in the middle, he has this very animated, faster sounding middle section. And then it returns back to the slow, beautiful A melody. All right, let me call up Mr. Chopin. And for those of you listening and who want to know, this is going to be Kissin playing it in Russia in, it looks like around 2000. All right. And I didn't mention before, but I'll say now. I'm gonna play our works today through because they are all they are miniatures. And I want to look now at Chaminade's take on something like that. This is a piece of her music. And again, you see it there. It says autumn at the top, and underneath it's a concert etude. So again, we're in this vein of music that used to be just about the study of a certain aspect of music, but now has become something as a concert piece in its own right. So we have that, and then I put these numbers on top of the bars again because similar to the Chopin, we have another irregular phrase length. And I think it really contributes to the beauty of the music. Instead of it being 8, it's 6. So she has this little 6-bar phrase. And here, let me play just a snippet of it so you know what this melody sounds like. Again, this is going to be very typical Chaminade because the music, the melody to it is very, very beautiful and very song-like. It moves, very stepwise motion. It's very hummable. This is just the melody to it. So that too, I think the beauty of the melody hides its obscure shape, just like the Chopin did. And here is the next phrase after that, and just like the Chopin, instead of it being 4 or 8 bars, and it's going to be a mystery here because Zoom doesn't want me to go to it. Zoom is hiding it from us. How dare they? All right, here we go again. All right, here's the second phrase of that piece of music. And here it's 10 bars. Again, so we do not have a 4, an 8, a 12, 20, 16. We have 10. And it continues along in that same kind of melodic vein. We'll hear. And after that, she also reflects the Chopin in that she's got a very lyrical opening section, and then in the middle has this very animated, quicker sounding musical section with much quicker notes in the piano. It sounds very stormy. And you'll see that reflected right here in the form of the piece. Again, we've got that ternary form, A, B, A. We've got opening, pretty gorgeous singable melody. This middle section, which is quick and moving and stormy. And then back to this final A section. And I'm going to play this for you. I'm excited to play this for you because I feel like this is, for me, this is my find for her. I really have fallen in love with this piece since working on this lecture for you guys called Autumn. I think it's really pretty. So I hope you like it. It says it's about 6 minutes. So here we go. Here's Autumn by Chaminade. All right, so there is Autumn, the Concert Etude number 2 by Chaminade. Something I just wanted to show you guys quickly is I know some of you, including Jeff and probably others, are pianists. Have you ever seen music that looks like this? Do you see the opening there? She puts the melody there in the right hand, and then all the little accompanying notes are smaller. It's strange. I don't know. I've never seen music like that. I get that she's saying play this out, bring this melody out, but after the in comments or in question and answer, if any of you have seen anything like that, I'm interested. Let me know. I've never come across this in musical in music land. Anyway, jumping ahead, something I wanted to mention as I leave this, because both of these sections of music we were talking about have that different phrase length, not 8 bars and 8 bars and 16 and things like that, is 2 ways that it shows up in popular music. The first place it shows up is the Beatles song Yesterday. The song Yesterday? That's another one. It's so beautiful, you don't really notice that instead of it being 8 bars long, it's 7 bars long. Here, let me play it for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So Yesterday is one that does that as well. And another one, another area is, the song from Evita, Don't Cry For Me, Argentina. The opening section of that, instead of it being in 16 bar chunks, they're 15. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it's this part right here, And I'd say the nerdy part of me thinks or wants to say that by Andrew Lloyd Webber making those 2 slightly different and maybe imperceptible changes to those phrase lengths, it makes the melody when it comes in, the big melody, even better. Because there's something about that when that melody hits, most people just love it. This part, and that melody is in 8 bars, but just there you go. 2 instances from my brain of how this irregular phrase length idea shows up even in popular music when we're not even really expecting it and thinking it would be there. All right, let's look at another example. And let's take Tchaikovsky here. Tchaikovsky's a Russian composer, obviously, and his famous works include 6 symphonies and Romeo and Juliet, the 1812 Overture, and various ballets like Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and The Nutcracker. And with Tchaikovsky, we get another instance of why do composers write miniatures? Think of like in The Nutcracker, all those characteristic pieces, they are designed to follow the script. Miniature pieces, if the choreography or the script calls for it being a short piece. Think of all the gems that he created, all the Russian dances and the Chinese dance and all of these beautiful, beautiful little like nuggets of music, and they're all miniatures. So Tchaikovsky, even though he could write a symphony with the best of them and write, very elaborate, long scores, great opera scenes, that are very long. He was also spectacular at crafting miniatures. And you could say he's, maybe most famous now in popular culture because of those smaller bits of music, like from the ballets. And here, let's take one example from him. And this is from The Nutcracker. And this is the dance of the Mirliton. And it's the little flute piece in the middle. You will know it from Holiday Time, probably. Or if you've been in the ballet, played the ballet, or gone to see it, you definitely will know it. It's one of the most famous parts of the characteristic pieces. The melody to it goes like this. I'm playing right there at bar number 1, where the red 1 is. That, super famous. In this piece with Tchaikovsky, Just having irregular phrase lengths, that doesn't mean you're going to have a hit piece at all. And this is a case too where this is an 8-bar phrase. I put the 1 there, the red 1, and then the 8 there at the end of it. It's very balanced. It breaks very neatly into 4-bar, 2 sets of 4. And this forms the A section of this piece of music. And the secondary piece right here is also a very even 8-bar phrase, easily broken down into 2 4s, or probably even to 2 2 2 and 2. And this is the piece of music in the middle of that sounds like this. I'm making a mess of this. Here, one more time. Like that. And it's very square. It doesn't detract from it, though. It's almost what you'd expect, in ballet music, it being so based on counts of 8. Here's a great example of how this music is built to suit that perfectly. And the form of this piece of music overall, the big form, as we've been talking about the other ones, is that same thing. It's ternary form. A, B, and then A. The A is the flute thing. That thing, and then the B section is this, the sort of a more rustic feel. And just the note here I wanted to put down is it's a great time to hear how a genius like Tchaikovsky, he indicates this form to us by his orchestration. The first section, A, is like flutes, woodwinds, and higher strings. And then the B section is with the brass instruments and lower woodwinds. So you get this very clear sectional orchestration of the A part and then totally different part of the orchestra playing B. And then when he returns to the A, he goes right back to that same high orchestration. So you can hear this completely. It's a great example of that. I'll leave this card up here. I'm going to play this through. This section is short. It's only about 2 minutes. All right. There's a Tchaikovsky little gem in there, and I hope you heard that cool use of his orchestration. And here, let's now look at a similar kind of thing happens in a piece of Chaminade's. Chaminade wrote a ballet score called the Kaliroway Suite, and in it is one of her most famous pieces. It's called the Scarf dance. And I know that I started off the lecture by playing that flute piece that is her most famous current piece. But if many pianists will play this scarf dance, so I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. And it is an excerpt from that ballet, and this has got their very similar characteristics to the Tchaikovsky. This opening section of it is 16 bars, and it's very clean. There's no obscurity about the shape of it. It's 8 and 8, forming very clear phrase lengths into a good compact 16 bars. This music here sounds like this. It's got a very attractive melody to it. And that's the first section, is the 16 bar phrase. And here's the second section, is an accompanying 16 bar phrase. So here we're dealing with very well proportioned music. It's very elegant, and in that way it's similar to the Tchaikovsky. She does veer in a different area for her, and that's in terms of the form. And here we have the song form, which is also, I think it's good to note or to see that the contact with Chaminade even today is it's a popular song form. It's the song form we know as AABA. I put in parentheses there's another BA because it repeats those sections again, but it's exactly the same. This song form is the basis of so much like Great American Songbook music. So much Gershwin is, an A, B, or a bridge section, and then back to an A. Someone to Watch Over Me is that way. They Can't Take That Away From Me. A lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein, Some Enchanted Evening is formed that way. If I Love You is that way. It's a very, very popular form, and it's not surprising to find that in a piece by Chaminade, because she was, at the beginning of that crossover between classical music and parlor music and salon music, making, being popular music as well. So here, I'm going to play this for you, and this is this is the orchestrated version from the ballet, but there are many, many videos online of the scarf dance being played on the piano. So here's this little 2-minute section of the scarf dance, and it's two primary sections of a B, and an A. Right. There we go. There's her elegant little scarf dance from Caliroe. And here I just want to leave with this. This is a quote from Chaminade. It says, "There is no sex in art. Genius is an independent quality. The woman of the future with broader outlook, her greater opportunities will go far. I believe in creating work of every description. There she is. So there is Miss Cecile Chaminade, and I'm very interested to know if is she new to you? Was this your first hearing of some of her music, or did some of you possibly run across her in the past? Jeff, had you ever heard of her or played any of her music?
Well, only that concertino I put in the chat that we played it in high school
Oh,
in the
there it is.
band version.
Yeah, turn off the Clint, turn off the original sound now.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go. I see that, Jeff. Thank you. Yeah, did you had a flute soloist? It says you said Regina.
Right, Regina, who runs, I think it's called Total Workout in Montclair, and Teresa, who's one of our exercise teachers on our Zoom classes, works there. So we had a little connection.
Very fun.
Other than that, rarely have seen her name on concert programs and broadcasts. I think, is there a trio maybe?
There's some chamber music.
Has a flute with a trio or whatever it is, and some songs maybe, but not often.
Yeah, part of her 400, a lot of her 400 published works were songs, piano voice songs, and lots of solo piano, lots and lots. And I will send out an email to Michelle with the tracks that I played today. So if you want to listen to them, and like that last one, there's that comes from the full ballet.
Clint, can you see the chat, the comments in the chat?
I can.
Do you want me to read them?
I see Chopin, smoke is in your eyes. I guess a little bit.
And Jennifer is saying that the sound is improved if you have headphones.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what Leslie is referring to, that it scared her. Leslie, you want to just jump in and tell us what scared you? No?
Or not?
I think she meant those little notes that you were wondering about.
Okay.
I saw on the music, it said like Fingerings by William Schmuckenberg or something up in the corner. The one that made those notes that small? I don't know. Or did she?
I don't know if it was maybe published that way. I saw it on some other pieces of hers. That it was like this very, I don't know. I don't want to be critical of it. It was like, hitting you over the head about what to play loud, where if you play a lot of, Chopin and complex piano music, a lot of times that happens where the melody will be kind of, buried in an inner voice, but I've never seen it pointed out like that before. I don't know. And Jeff, it's on IMSLP if you're interested in seeing it.
Well, I loved it. Another hidden gem that it wowed me. I'm keep them coming, Clint.
Gotta go look for those Chaminade cigarettes. Thank you, everybody.
Wow,
Thank you. That was a great introduction to her. Never heard of her before. Thank you.
I'll send the tracks that I shared today, but if the minute you click on her on YouTube, there's a pretty vast amounts of piano recordings and things like that. You'll find lots of things.
Wonderful.
Hey, how are you?
So if you're
Yay.
interested in that.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. And I know Michelle usually asks me about next week. Next week, we will be looking at our only man of this set of 4. I figure we got to throw the guys one bone, right?
Sure.
And this is, I won't tell you who it is, but he's an Armenian American. So we'll take a look at his music, and I'll leave it there. I don't want to tell you because you guys will all listen and know what I'm going to say before I say it to you.
I think I know who it is.
Don't say it, Jeff.
I'm not going to say it, but did he write a lot of symphonies?
He might have. He wrote a couple. So we'll dig into him and some world of 20th century symphonic writing, some of that. So thank you, everybody. Great to see
Thank
you.
you.